Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast. I'm your host, Mark Hillary. This is the final CX Files podcast of 2018, being broadcast on December 28th. So we're just a couple of days away from 2019 now. This podcast has been running for around half a year now. So to close out the year, I invited a friend of mine, Peter Ryan, to join me once again to look at the year ahead. Peter was the very first guest on this podcast. You can go back and look at the archives easily if you want to. And I'm delighted to welcome him back to CX Files again to explore 2019 together. Peter is based in Montreal, Canada, and he's the principal at Ryan Strategic Advisory. Peter is well known across the world as a leading expert on CX. In 2015, the British journal Contact Center Helper actually named him in first place in their best respected contact center expert list. Okay, so let's go straight to Peter's thoughts on what we're going to see in 2019. Okay, Peter, so this is the final podcast, the final CX Files podcast for the year, going out a couple of days before New Year's Eve. And it's been quite an eventful 2018. What were some of the highlights for you in terms of clients you've been seeing, trends that have been developing, maybe new regions that you've been looking at?
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and it's an honor to be on the final CX Files podcast for 2018, and congratulations. I think that what you're bringing to the industry with this podcast is phenomenal and tremendous value for anybody across the BPO ecosystem. From my own perspective, I think that there's been a few trends that have really stood out for me. And as I review the writing I've done over the course of the past 12 months or so, the one that really stands out for me is got to be consolidation. You know, when we think about the examples of consolidation, there's two that really stood out for me. The one that started out earlier on in the year was the decision on the part of ITEL BPO to acquire Granada Corporation. That was very much a very big play from the standpoint of the American nearshore, and I think a very good deal in which ITEL BPO took on not only some good home-based agent functionality, but also it implanted itself in the Latin American market and gave it that much further significance with regards to Spanish language delivery. And certainly I think that the big one over the course of 2018 was a Concentrix buyout of Convergys. I think now we're seeing a situation where we've got effectively a competitor that's now in the same range global revenue-wise as Teleperformance. And certainly that was one that had a lot of people talking over the course of the past 12 months. But the bottom line is that consolidation is definitely something that's on the minds of pretty well every player in the industry. Do they want to buy or do they want to be bought? If they are looking to buy, what type of firms are they looking to pick up? Is it firms that will give them a particular angle in terms of technology capabilities, of functionality, such as the ITEL purchase of Granada Corporation that gave them that home-based agent functionality, or are we talking about plays that might put a particular vendor in a dominant position within a geographic or vertical market? These are really, I think, the big trends that are going into 2019 from a consolidation angle, and it's certainly a trend that I think will continue to be very much a dominant one over the course of the next 12 months as it was over the previous 12 months.
Mm-hmm. And I think that you can probably add to that the Teleperformance purchase of Intelinet, which I think was last June, which was itself $1 billion deal, wasn't it?
Very much so, and it just speaks to the volume of the deals that we've seen over the course of the past 12 months or so. It's really, I think, something that we cannot underestimate in terms of what's happening in the industry. There is a shakeout going on, and a friend of mine who's been in the industry for a while said every 5 to 10 years there is a shakeout that happens in front office BPO. We're experiencing one now. The question is, to what extent are we going to continue seeing it?
Do you think that a lot of this activity is driven by this need to have a shakeout of players that are not quite keeping up with where the industry is heading? And to that point, what I mean is we're moving away from the idea of just hiring a company to provide a contact center and to provide agents, and we're looking at companies that can actually provide advice, consulting, analytics, artificial intelligence. You know, we're almost in a different world now.
Yep, we are. And to my mind, it's very much a situation where, yes, you do see companies that aren't potentially keeping up, that are getting acquired. I also see a lot of companies that are doing very, very well that are being bought just for that reason, the fact that they are ahead of the curve and they are doing exceptionally well in a particular area. And you might get another provider that decides they want to take on that capability and they want to take on that expertise in order to really shore up their position within the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Well, if this kind of consolidation in the marketplace was really the defining trend of last year, what would you say that we should be looking out for in 2019? Because we're only a couple of days away from the new year now.
We are, and it's very exciting going into 2019. I think that probably what we're going to start seeing in the coming 12 months in terms of front office BPO and the direction that people want to take it is what's going to happen around artificial intelligence. AI is on the tip of the tongue of pretty well every executive, every opinion leader, every influencer wanting to try and figure out the angle that this technology can be used from a customer experience management perspective. There's a lot of hype in the marketplace right now. It reminds me of automation, or what we called RPA a few years ago. And I think there's a lot of attempts to try and see the forest for the trees. Now, in terms of AI, there are some tremendous strides that we know that have been made with regards to this technology. The question is, how best can AI technology be applied from the standpoint of servicing consumers, whether it's in an interaction that's voice-based or digitally based? That's the question I think that is going to be the defining trend over the course of the coming 12 months.
And it's interesting that you mentioned RPA there, and this is a technology that was much criticised for the last couple of years. But I think that inside 2018, we've certainly seen real case studies. I mean, companies getting real value from this. And do you think that that is partly because the solution is not just RPA, but it's a combination of RPA, machine learning, AI? It's being able to wrap these technologies together.
Yeah, it's being able to wrap them together, and it's being able to find the applicability when it comes to a customer interaction standpoint. One of the biggest criticisms I have had over the course of my career as an analyst in the contact center field is the fact that there's so many organizations that have deployed technology for the sake of deploying what they see as cool technology. But unless the technology is there in order to better satisfy the consumers with regards to the questions or the comments that they might have around a product or service that they have taken up, there's no real point to it. It's just going to frustrate consumers. So to my mind, yes, there's a wrap up of the different technology, whether it's the AI, the automation, and the analytics behind it. But unless those three technologies or any other ones that might be applicable are done in such a fashion that it's going to make interactions easier from the end user's perspective as opposed to more difficult or confusing, then the technology really doesn't have a place yet. The good news is I think we've seen a lot of elements of the past 12, 18 months especially where there's been some very, very good deployments of these types of technologies wrapped together, and that we're seeing, I think, a lot more acceptance on the part of not just the enterprises, but also consumers in terms of how they can be used.
Yeah, and I think that clearly there's a value in services like robotic automation for basic services like a password reset. But I think that sometimes there's a lot of basic points that get overlooked. An example is that when I was locked out of PayPal recently, and I went into PayPal and I tried logging in, and they have an automated system to do the password reset. But I needed to use my phone number to authenticate the reset, and they had an old phone number. And there was absolutely no way that I could get the automated system to understand when I was telling it, you've got the wrong phone number. And I couldn't find any way to switch to a human agent. So that's like, a really basic example of if there was a button there that said, take me to a human now, then I could have fixed the problem easily.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's the whole thing. It's got to be technology that's deployed in such a fashion that it's not just going to be easy to use, but it's also going to be easy to manipulate. And you're not going to have experiences that are going to frustrate the consumer like you experienced with regards to getting locked out with your password. It happens so often to people right now, and there has to be a better way.
Okay, Peter, that's great. So thanks for those insights. Have a great new year, and hopefully we'll catch up in 2019.
I think we can plan on that.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. Please take a moment to review the podcast because this helps other listeners to find it. And if you have any suggestions, then get in touch with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I am at Mark Hillary with 2 L's, or just search Google for Mark Hillary.